My brother, the young mistress's bodyguard, swore his devotion transcended mortal love. To spare her palace loneliness, he sold our ancestral home, shattered my betrothal, and forced me into servitude. When she was falsely accused, he broke my legs to buy her freedom. When rebels stormed the palace, he draped me in her robes as his sacrificial decoy. I died bleeding in the gutter, until my eyes snapped open, back to the day he sold my future. Thank you for watching. Your support keeps these stories coming. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more captivating tales. What story should we tell next? Let us know below. Chapter 1. What? You want Mu Yun to enter the palace as a palace maid? When I woke up, I saw my parents' anxious faces. My brother Zhou Shufeng, dressed in a brand new guard's uniform, nodded firmly at my parents. The young lady is entering the palace, and she needs a capable person by her side. I think Mu Yun is the perfect choice. I immediately realized I had been reborn. On that day, my brother informed the entire family that he had spent a fortune to secure connections, not only buying himself a position as a guard but also adding my name to the list of palace maids entering the palace. At that moment, my parents' expressions were grim. My brother entering the palace as a guard could be seen as striving for a better future. But I had already been betrothed to a suitable suitor, a wealthy family with good character. Someone my parents had worked hard to find for me. If I entered the palace, this marriage would certainly be called off. Not to mention the dangers of the palace. I might not even survive until I was 25 to leave. And even if I did, I would likely be ruined for life. At that moment, my mother began to cry. My father, however, was thinking of something else. He furrowed his brows and asked my older brother, "Fenger, you've made so many connections. That must have cost hundreds of taels of silver, right? Where on earth would we get that much money?" My heart ached. The memories of my past life flooded back. And I knew what my brother was about to say, the answer that had caused my father's hair to turn white overnight. Sure enough, my brother spoke calmly. "I sold our ancestral home in the old village." At those words, my father's face turned ashen, and my mother nearly fainted. You see, the ancestral home in the old village was the lifeblood of my parents. They had worked hard all their lives, hoping to return to that house in their old age to enjoy a peaceful retirement. Now that the house had been sold, and all the silver had been used by my older brother to secure connections, my parents had nowhere to go in their old age and would have to rely on the master of the estate for their livelihood. And even if they call it retirement, if they end up with a cruel estate manager, they'll be forced to work tirelessly. And worse, they might even be scolded and beaten at the slightest provocation. In my previous life, I had furiously accused my brother of being unfilial, only to be rebuked by him. Mu Yun, loyalty and filial piety come first. Besides, our family has food and grain, how can we be so desperate? The young miss is alone in the palace, so cold and afraid. What you should be thinking about now is how to serve her well and protect her, not filling your head with selfish thoughts. My brother has always been like this. Ever since I can remember, he has taught me to be loyal to the young lady for the rest of my life. But in fact, we are not really the young lady's servants. The young lady was born in a marquis's mansion. My father was the accountant for the marquis's estate, and my mother was in charge of the gardens. 2 years ago, they redeemed our contracts and became free. But my brother clings to his role as the young lady's servant and refuses to give it up. Once a servant, always a servant. The young lady is my master for life. He not only swears loyalty to the young lady but also demands that I do the same. In my previous life, he sent me to the palace and arranged for me to work at the spring water pavilion, where the young lady was stationed. When the young lady was suspected by the emperor, the Ministry of Punishment took me and the other 2 maids on duty away for rigorous interrogation. Even after entering the Ministry of Punishment, I still clung to a sliver of hope, because I knew that the eunuch in charge of executions at the Ministry of Punishment had a close relationship with my brother. He knew I was my brother's sister, so he would surely show mercy during the torture. But I never expected my brother to come to the Ministry of Punishment personally and instruct that eunuch. The young master is currently under the emperor's suspicion, and the situation is dangerous. You must beat her severely. The more brutal the better. Only if these palace maids continue to insist on the young master's innocence will the emperor's suspicions be dispelled. Even the eunuch couldn't bear to watch and hesitated. But Mu Yun is your own sister. If something happens to her, her life will be ruined. How will you explain this to your parents? Her brother shook his head solemnly. Her current status is first and foremost the young master's palace maid, and only then is she our parents' daughter and my sister. Loyalty comes first. I cannot disregard personal feelings. At that moment, I couldn't believe what I was hearing and cried out, "Brother!" But he only frowned. His face filled with resolve. Mu Yun, this is a time when true loyalty is tested. You must show the young master your loyalty. For the sake of loyalty, I and the other two palace maids endured torture in the Ministry of Punishment. I was the luckiest. I only lost a leg but managed to survive. The other two palace maids were not so fortunate. One couldn't endure the torture and bit her tongue to commit suicide, while the other died from the beatings. Such a tragic scene finally convinced the emperor of the young lady's innocence. After I was carried back to Chenshuaishan, the young mistress never came to see me. She was busy in the imperial study with the emperor, trying to win his favor, and had no time to spare for a lowly palace maid like me. My brother sighed. The emperor knows how much the young mistress suffered this time. He has already promoted her rank and bestowed many gifts as compensation. After this incident, the emperor began to favor the young lady even more. When he went on a southern tour, he took her along. Unfortunately, before they even reached the south, they encountered rebel soldiers who boarded their ship. The rebels rushed onto the ship, grabbing the women and intending to rape them. They were so brazen that they ignored the palace maids and targeted the empresses dressed in silk robes. At the last moment, my brother rushed over. He shielded the young lady, who was screaming and crying, then forcefully draped a set of a concubine's outer garments over me and pushed me out of the cabin. That was the worst nightmare of my life. The rebels grabbed me, shouting that they wanted to taste the emperor's woman. On the deck, my brother was protecting the young lady and jumping onto a small boat to escape. He didn't even glance back at me. The rebels tore off my clothes. Fortunately, as one of them lunged at me, I managed to grab a knife dropped by a dead guard. I stabbed the rebel in the body and, as he screamed and fell, I jumped into the river. Luckily, I managed to grab onto a floating piece of wood. After drifting in the river all night, I finally managed to climb ashore. By then, the reinforcements had arrived, and the rebels had been completely wiped out. The emperor and the empress were resting in a nearby carriage. I rushed toward the carriage where the young lady was. However, before I could get close, I was stopped by someone. It was my older brother. There was no trace of joy on his face at seeing me survive the ordeal, only deep concern. Mu Yun, as an unmarried woman, you were attacked by the rebels and lost your virtue. You must not approach the young master again. Life in the palace is already difficult enough. The young master's reputation cannot withstand any further tarnishing. I was so shocked that my whole body trembled. Brother, what does this mean? I am the young master's palace maid. If you won't let me return, are you telling me to jump into the river and kill myself? My brother looked sorrowful and nodded. Mu Yun, to die protecting the young master is to fulfill your duty as a loyal servant. It is your fate. Seeing that I refused to leave, he called several colleagues, who forcibly carried me away. Thus, I was abandoned far away on the street. though my broken legs had been set. They had been soaked in river water all night and now ached unbearably. I do not remember how I died. I only recall, in a daze, someone saying to me, "If a father is unkind, why should a son be filial? If a master shows no mercy, why should a servant be loyal?" I shed tears. Yes. My entire life had been wasted as this so-called loyal servant. How utterly worthless. "Jo Muchuin, do you wish to start over?" the voice asked again. I nodded frantically. If I could start over, I would never be that foolishly loyal person again. Heaven had eyes, it truly granted me another chance. This time, when I saw my older brother selling our ancestral home, I didn't jump up and scold him. What was the use of scolding him? After my previous life, I already knew that my older brother couldn't be reasoned with. So I only comforted my parents after my older brother left. "Father, Mother, please rest assured. I will earn silver quickly and buy back the ancestral home. Soon." The day came for me to enter the palace. My brother took me to the palace gates and went to report to the guards. "I've given the matron in charge some silver. She'll assign you to work at the spring water pavilion, just like in my previous life." My brother admonished me. "Mu Yun, you must be loyal to the young lady." I nodded in agreement. Then, after entering the palace gates, I ran straight to the clothing bureau without looking back. A few days later, my brother discovered that I hadn't gone to the spring water pavilion to serve the young lady, but had instead become a seamstress at the clothing bureau. He couldn't help but fly into a rage. I said tearfully, "It wasn't my idea. I lost my handkerchief on the way, and it was picked up by Lady Chin from the clothing bureau. She saw that I was skilled at embroidery and insisted on asking the matron in charge of assignments to take me. Of course, I had deliberately lost the handkerchief. In my previous life, Qin Laonyang had always admired my needlework, but at that time I was already part of Chen Shuixian, so she could only exchange techniques with me in private. In this life, to be chosen by her, I stayed up all night before entering the palace to embroider this handkerchief. The design was the sea plum blossom, which was Qin Laonyang's favorite. Upon seeing it, she was immediately captivated by my talent and named me to join the Imperial Clothing Bureau. Qin Yangyang was personally placed in the clothing bureau by the Empress Dowager, so the matron in charge of the bureau wouldn't dare to offend such a powerful figure just for the silver my brother gave her. Thus, I naturally ended up in the clothing bureau. The first step of my plan had succeeded. My brother was furious. I said slowly, "Shouldn't you be happy for me? The Imperial Clothing Bureau is a lucrative position, and one often receives bonuses. Perhaps in a year or two, I'll be able to buy back our ancestral home." My brother didn't care about the ancestral home, he only cared about the young miss. But what about the young miss? "I sent you to the palace to help her." I interrupted him. The young lady clearly brought 4 personal maids with her into the palace. Why are you making her sound like she's all alone? According to palace regulations, after concubines are selected and enter the palace, they are allowed to bring their maids from when they were young ladies. The young lady comes from a noble family, so she brought 4. Yet my brother insisted on sending me to her palace. My brother coldly said, "What do you know? The more people around you, the better." I sneered. Is that so? Does my brother think the young lady doesn't have enough people around her? Or does he think that if I'm with her, he'll have an excuse to visit her anytime he wants? This was something I only realized after entering the palace. My brother's position as a guard meant he frequently entered and exited the Empress's palaces, which inevitably aroused suspicion. But with me, his own sister, serving in Chen Shuixian, he had a legitimate reason to visit the lady. Now that I had exposed his true intentions, my brother flew into a rage. "You have twisted my loyal heart into something so vile. It's clear your mind is filled with filthy thoughts. Today, I, your elder brother, will teach you a lesson. As he raised his hand to strike me, suddenly, a sharp voice rang out from around the corner. Who is making such a commotion? A figure in a bright yellow dragon robe came into view. It was the emperor returning from court. My brother and I hurriedly knelt down. The emperor walked slowly toward us, the hem of his robe brushing past us. The eunuch by his side scolded us. A guard in a palace mate are fighting in the Forbidden City? What kind of behavior is this? My brother hurriedly cowed out, Your Majesty, please forgive us. Eunuch, this palace maid is my younger sister. She behaved improperly. So, as her elder brother, I was just teaching her a lesson. Before he could finish, the eunuch interrupted him harshly. How dare you? Are there no rules in the Forbidden City? If a palace maid behaves improperly, it is the matron's duty to discipline her. When did it become your place, a mere guard, to interfere? Bring them here, 50 lashes each. As the young eunuch was about to drag us away, the emperor waved his hand. Enough. At the emperor's command, the eunuchs stopped immediately. The head eunuch smiled broadly. Your Majesty, how shall we handle this? The emperor remained silent. He walked over to me, lowered his gaze, and asked, Did you sew this pouch yourself? I was startled, realizing he was referring to the lake blue pouch hanging at my waist. I hurriedly replied, Yes. The emperor said, Your craftsmanship is quite good. What is your name? I replied, This servant is Mu Yun, serving in the clothing bureau. The emperor nodded. The autumn dew bathes your hair, a unique name. Well, since I am in a good mood today, I will spare you and your brother for this offense. But do not let this happen again. With that, the emperor departed with his entourage in a grand procession. My brother and I knelt all the way as the emperor departed. Only after his figure had completely disappeared did we rise to our feet. I had thought my brother would be relieved that we had avoided punishment today. But instead he frowned at me. Mu Yun, when you spoke to the emperor just now, why were you speaking so softly and differently from usual? Could it be you harbored some improper thoughts? I was so annoyed I laughed out loud. That was the emperor. When I speak to the emperor, I should be soft-spoken and cautious. Should I instead speak loudly and arrogantly? This retort left my brother speechless. But he still frowned and warned me. Mu Yun, as your elder brother, I must warn you. As a servant, you must stay within your bounds and never harbor such lofty ambitions. If you ever harbor thoughts of climbing into the emperor's bed, that would be declaring war on the young lady. Don't blame me for disowning you as my sister. I scoffed. The emperor merely asked me a couple of questions. And you're already so tense. You're even eating the young lady's jealousy. You truly are her loyal servant. After saying that, I ignored my brother and turned back to the clothing bureau. Speaking of the clothing bureau, it was truly a good job. I delivered the embroidered clothes to the mistresses of various palaces, and they praised my craftsmanship endlessly, often giving me generous rewards. Some of the more generous mistresses even grabbed a handful of gold coins and gave them to me. Holding the gold coins in my hand, I couldn't help but shed tears of joy. You see, in my previous life at Chenshui Xian, I also worked on embroidery until late at night every day. But the shoes, socks, and perfume pouches I embroidered were all given to the emperor by the young lady, who claimed they were her own work. In order to compete for the emperor's favor, even Qin Lao sighed for me. She is your mistress, you can't compete with her for credit. Such bitterness can only be swallowed in silence. Thus, until my death, the palace believed the master of needlework was the young lady. Aside from Qin Lao and a few embroiderers in the clothing bureau, no one knew my name. Fortunately, in this life, this skill finally brought tangible benefits. In just a few months, I had saved a substantial amount of silver. While I was saving money, my brother wasn't idle either. He often volunteered to take night shifts for his colleagues just to be stationed at the entrance of Chen. When the young lady was lonely, he kept her company. When she was bullied, he comforted her. And when she didn't need him, my brother would often come to my place. He wasn't there out of concern for me, but to keep an eye on me. Ever since the emperor asked me a question last time, my brother has been keeping a close eye on me. He frequently comes to inquire about my movements, ensuring I don't secretly flirt with the emperor behind his back. One day, he happened to wander over to me, and I couldn't help but sneer. "Brother, there are at least 1,000 beautiful palace maids in this palace. Why are you fixated on me alone? Don't you fear that others might take advantage of this opportunity to rise in status?" However, this time, my brother didn't respond to my sarcastic remark. His expression was strange, even a bit ingratiating. "Mu Yun," he said, "did you get your hands on some snow jujube?" My heart skipped a beat. Snow jujube is a rare flower from the western regions. Its petals are used in medicine and are effective against hundreds of ailments. Back then, only one snow jujube plant was ever offered as tribute from the western regions, and it was presented to the Empress Dowager by the emperor. In my previous life, before the Empress Dowager's birthday, I worked tirelessly day and night, pouring my heart and soul into embroidering a painting of a crane celebrating longevity. I did it all for one thing, to obtain the petals of the snow jujube flower. I was raised by my grandmother, who had been suffering from a cough for years, and her condition had grown increasingly severe, to the point where she was coughing up blood. The physician said that her frail constitution meant that if the illness was not cured, she might not survive the winter. For this reason, I presented the crane-themed longevity painting to the Empress Dowager on her birthday, praying for her endless blessings and longevity. The picture was embroidered with exquisite care, and the Empress Dowager was very pleased. She was about to reward me when she saw me kneeling on the ground with my head bowed and tears streaming down my face. The Empress Dowager immediately frowned. "Isn't this a birthday gift for me? Why are you crying?" Qin Lao hurriedly spoke up to explain for me. "The Empress Dowager is so kind, perhaps this child has been reminded of her grandmother." I bowed my head while recounting my grandmother's illness in detail. The Empress Dowager was in a good mood at the time, and upon hearing this, her compassionate heart moved. "Our dynasty governs the realm with filial piety. Your devotion to your grandmother is truly commendable." The Empress Dowager then ordered someone to pick the petals of the snow jujube flower and bestow them upon me. Thus, I finally obtained the life-saving medicine to cure my grandmother's illness. In my previous life, as a palace maid, I couldn't leave the palace freely, so I entrusted the snow jujube to my brother, asking him to take it home as soon as possible. My brother agreed readily and left with the snow jujube. But half a month later, I received the news of my grandmother's passing. That day, I frantically searched for my brother, only to hear the head maid by the young mistress's side thanking him. The snow jujube brought by Zhou the guard was indeed effective. The young mistress applied the flower petal juice to her face, and within just a few days, all the scars disappeared. "We truly don't know how to thank Zhou the guard," my brother replied with a comforting expression. "It's just my duty as a servant. There's no need to thank me." I collapsed, barely able to stand. It turned out that the young mistress had been scratched on the face by a cat kept by another concubine, leaving a faint scar on her snow-white skin. The young mistress wept constantly, and my brother was deeply distressed. So, instead of sending the snow-white jujube to the palace for our grandmother, he gave it to the young lady. He traded our grandmother's life for the young lady's restored beauty. My brother noticed me sitting on the ground, unable to move. He walked over, his face stern, and warned me, "This must never be spoken of. If it is, I will hold you solely responsible." I burst into tears. "Brother, you were also raised on my grandmother's rice porridge. How could you watch her die like that? My brother spoke solemnly. That's a woman's perspective. Birth, aging, sickness, and death are the natural course of life. Our grandmother passed away at a ripe old age. It was a joyful funeral. But the young miss is still in the prime of her life. For a woman, appearance is of utmost importance. With such a scar on her face, how will she survive in this ruthless palace? Mu Yun, you've been serving in Chen Shui Xian for so long. Do you know why you're still just a third-class palace made in the outer courtyard? It's because you'll never learn to think of your master first. I know that with my brother around, our family is doomed to ruin. Therefore, in this life, after obtaining the snow jujube, I said nothing and never mentioned it to my brother. But in the palace, with so many people and so many eyes, the news somehow reached my brother. You're a palace maid and can't move freely. Hand the snow jujube over to me, my brother said. I refused to fall for it. What snow? What jujube? I don't know anything. My brother was displeased. All right. The little eunuch in the Empress Dowager's palace told me while we were drinking that the Empress Dowager has bestowed the snow jujube upon you. I didn't say a word and turned to leave. My brother grabbed me by the arm. Zhou Muyu. I am your elder brother. How can you treat me like a thief? I've already searched your quarters, and there was nothing there. So the snow lotus must be hidden on your person, right? I struggled desperately, but my strength was no match for his. The paper packet wrapped in snow lotus petals was snatched from me. I lunged forward. Give it back. My brother tried to dodge, but in the struggle, the packet slipped from his hands, sliding down the rocks and plunging into the 1,000-carp pool. My mind went blank. My brother cursed. Zhou Muchuan. You. I didn't hear the rest of his words. I plunged into the 1,000-carp pool, and the water engulfed me. I fished around in the pool for a long time before managing to retrieve all the snow lotus petals. By the time it grew dark, I managed to climb out of the pool, stumbling and falling. However, as soon as I reached the shore, I saw to my despair that sitting under the shade not far away was a woman dressed in a pale yellow palace robe. It was none other than the young miss. 2 palace maids attended her, while my brother stood bowed beside her. Upon seeing me, my brother immediately said, "Young mistress, the snow-white rose is on her person." The young mistress nodded, remained seated, and extended her hand toward me. "Since you have retrieved it, bring it here." Her expression was utterly matter-of-fact. I clutched the cloth bag tightly in my hand and took a step back. "This is my property." The young lady's expression became puzzled. "Mu Yun, is that your name?" She called out my name. "I am your master, and you are my servant. How dare you argue with your master?" I gritted my teeth and plucked up my courage to say, "My parents did indeed serve in the Marquis mansion, but they have since redeemed their contracts and are now free. Although I entered the palace, I do not serve in the young mistress's palace. So how could my things belong to the young mistress?" The young lady furrowed her eyebrows, looking confused and sad. "Listen to this. How could the home mansion raise such an ungrateful servant?" My brother scolded me harshly. "Mu Yun, the master has come here in person. If you continue to be ungrateful, the Zhou family will disown you." The young miss sat motionless in her seat, but her 2 maidservants came forward, one on each side, grabbing me and trying to take the bag. I struggled desperately, screaming, "Help!" The young miss was so angry her face turned red. "Quick! Cover her mouth!" "Oh dear! This is so embarrassing!" I screamed even louder. "Help! Help!" One palace maid covered my mouth, while the other forcefully snatched the cloth bag containing the snow-white flowers. The young lady was satisfied. She looked at the snow-white petals in the bag and said to her brother, "We must thank Zhou the guard once again." Her eyes, as clear as autumn water, turned to her brother. And she spoke softly. Everything you've done for me, I've always kept in my heart. The young lady had only said a few words of thanks. But her brother was as excited as if he'd drunk fake wine, his eyes shining brightly. All of this is what a servant should do. Her brother bowed. My young mistress may rest assured. I will certainly discipline this girl properly in the future. The brother escorted the young lady back to the palace, leaving me soaked and abandoned on the ground, no one caring about my well-being. Once their figures had completely disappeared, I scrambled to my feet and ran back to the clothing bureau like the wind. Qin Lao had been waiting for me for a long time. Why are you so late? Oh, you're completely soaked. I shook the water droplets from my hair and smiled. It's nothing. You can't catch a wolf without sacrificing the lamb. Qin Mam must have already sent the snow jujube out of the palace. Right? It's been sent out. I had my nephew who's on duty at the palace gate deliver it personally to your home. A smile curled at the corners of my mouth as I laughed silently. That's right. The bag of petals taken by my brother and the young lady wasn't snow jujube at all. The real snow jujube petals I had already given to Qin Mama earlier, asking her to help me send them out of the palace. Later, I gathered some white petals from the imperial garden, tore them into pieces, and carried them with me, preparing for my brother to come looking for me. I knew my brother wouldn't let me off the hook. If he couldn't find the snow lotus on me or in my quarters, he would definitely go back to keep an eye on grandmother. In that case, I might as well put on a big show and wait for him to take the bait. Sure enough, after going to great lengths to take the packet of snow lotus from me, my brother didn't bother me for a long time. Whenever he had a moment, he rushed to Chenshuixian. Even if he couldn't enter the palace, being able to hear news about the young lady outside the palace walls made him very happy. Unfortunately, this time, my brother didn't get to enjoy his happiness for long. The young lady used my fake snow lotus petals to make a petal juice, which she applied to her face every day. Not only did it fail to fade the scars, but it also caused a rash of small red bumps to appear. My brother was summoned for questioning. The young lady was usually as calm as a chrysanthemum, but with her appearance ruined like this, she couldn't help but panic. Her voice became shrill. Zhou Shufeng, is this your loyalty? My brother also panicked. Tears welling up in his eyes, I personally checked various ancient texts, and snow jujube does indeed have scar-fading effects. Unless this snow jujube is fake. Before he could finish, the young lady was so angry that she grabbed a book and threw it at him. You told me that your sister received snow jujube personally from the Empress Dowager. Now you're telling me it's fake. The young lady was furious. But upon further reflection, her eyes filled with suspicion. Zhou Shufeng, could it be that another palace has bribed you to harm me? The older brother knelt down with a thud. My lady, please discern the truth. Even if I were to die, I would never betray you. Since the young lady entered the palace, her brother had used his authority as a guard to assist her in various ways. Even when the young lady wanted to secretly harm concubines from other palaces, she only needed to call her brother and give him a subtle hint, and he would immediately become her henchman, carrying out these dirty deeds for her. Recalling all the favors her brother had done for her in the past, the young lady's tone softened. She stepped forward to help him up and said, I was blinded by anger and should not have suspected you. Everyone in this palace will betray me, but I believe you. Zhou will never do so. The young lady's soft words brought tears to her brother's eyes. As soon as he stepped out of the spring water pavilion, he rushed to the clothing bureau to settle accounts with me. When my brother burst into the clothing bureau, I was playing with two maids, twisting ropes. My brother, consumed by anger, didn't bother with them. He grabbed me by the collar and shouted, Zhou Muchuan, are you deliberately causing trouble? I looked at him in confusion. What? Don't pretend. I've already investigated. Grandmother's illness has completely healed. Did you swap out the snow jujube? This time, you not only deceived me but also deceived the young master. Now the young master has a rash on his face. You deserve to die 10,000 times over. I burst into tears. Looking terrified, has Lady Yao taken a grudge against me? I only wanted to cure grandmother's illness, I didn't mean to deceive anyone. Brother, you and Lady Yao are close. Can you please persuade the young master to spare my life? My brother was about to continue scolding me when he suddenly noticed the sky blue long skirt I had just finished embroidering. The hem was densely outlined with silver thread, and when the sunlight hit it, it resembled endless waves. My brother asked, "What is this?" I hurriedly replied, "The song noble consort of the Changle Palace summoned the imperial physician to examine grandmother's illness. Out of gratitude for such kindness, I thought of embroidering a dress to present to the noble consort." My brother's expression immediately darkened. Everyone knew that the song concubine was the most senior and favored concubine, while the young lady was a rising star. The two of them were the most favored by the emperor in the palace. Therefore, it was only natural that they were sworn enemies. Now, not only had I given the young lady fake snow lotus, but I had also embroidered a dress for her enemy. My brother was furious. He snatched the dress from my hands. "Enough. I won't argue with you. But if you want to live, stay away from the Palace of Eternal Joy. I'll take this skirt to the Spring Water Pavilion to help the young mistress calm down and spare you from your death sentence." I chased after my brother but couldn't catch up, and could only watch helplessly as he took the skirt away. When I returned, wiping away my tears, the two little maids who had been playing with me had already turned pale with anger. I cried, "I couldn't save the skirt. Please speak a word for me to the Empress Dowager, and I'll make a better one for her in the future." Indeed, these two girls looked ordinary, but their backgrounds were far from ordinary. They were both maids in Empress Song's palace. Empress Song had many maids under her, and I had deliberately chosen these two, who were the most gossipy, to befriend them in advance. I invited them to play with me when they weren't on duty. Sure enough, after just a few days, my brother came to confront me. The entire scene was witnessed by these two palace maids, who are now extremely displeased. "Mu Yun's sister, it's not your fault. It's your brother who took it by force. But why did he force you to give your skirt to Chen Shui Xian? You've never served there before." I wiped away my tears and said, "I don't know either. According to the rules, since my brother and I work in the palace, we should treat all the palace masters equally. But my brother has always insisted that I favor Chen Shui Xian, forcing me to give all the good things to Yao Guiran first." The two young palace maids exchanged glances, their eyes already filled with malice. I pretended to be clueless and gave them the hand-embroidered pouches I had made, then sent them out of the clothing bureau, watching them rush toward the Changle Palace. I couldn't help but smile. They would definitely bring this information to the Empress. After that, the palace experienced a rare period of peace. The young lady stayed in the Spring Water Pavilion, treating her face. The home mansion still had some connections and found a famous doctor with a special remedy for the young lady, although it was not as effective as Snow Rose. After 2 months, the scars on the young lady's face gradually faded away. I used this time to embroider a new skirt with 100 butterflies and flowers for the imperial concubine. The dress was exquisitely beautiful, with butterflies and flower buds that seemed to come to life. The Empress consort was overjoyed. She had always admired my craftsmanship, often rewarding me with handfuls of golden melon seeds. Upon hearing of my grandmother's illness, she even sent her trusted court physician to our home for treatment. Now, the two young palace maids had spoken highly of me to the Empress consort, who, in a cheerful mood, asked me, "Would you be willing to come to the Changle Palace to serve me?" I returned to discuss it with Qin Laonyang, who was overjoyed for me. She told me that Empress Song had once been a palace maid herself, and despite her rise to prominence, She had never forgotten her roots. Though the other concubines in the harem all said she was ruthless, none of the servants had a single bad word to say about her. If I could serve in her palace, I would certainly have a bright future ahead of me. The other embroiderers from the clothing bureau were also happy for me and gave me many gifts, hoping that if I became a favorite of the empress, I would look out for them as well. However, before I could even reach the Changle Palace with my bags, I was intercepted by my older brother. There was no one around, and my brother's expression was grim. Don't you know that the Changle Palace and the Chunshui Pavilion are sworn enemies? I knew that. Of course. Seeing that I showed no remorse, my brother grew even angrier. Since you were able to leave the clothing bureau, why didn't you go to serve at the young lady's spring water pavilion? Do you know that the young lady heard you went to the Changle Palace and was heartbroken? She feels that the master-servant bond we once shared was all for nothing. Even if you went to serve in another palace, why did you choose the Changle Palace? The Empress consort is ruthless and cruel. You're aiding the enemy, you won't end well. At this point, I didn't bother pretending anymore and sneered. Oh, so Lady Yao is so close to me. Is she? Then why didn't she give me any medicine money when grandmother was seriously ill? And every time we delivered clothes to the masters of other palaces, everyone received a tip. But she just gave us a cold look, as if we owed her something. My brother flew into a rage and shouted, "You're only thinking about that little bit of reward money. No wonder the young master, who is so noble, doesn't look at you. Now that I'm part of Song Guifei's entourage, my brother dares not treat me as harshly as before." He merely glared at me a few times before turning away to comfort the young lady at Chunshui Xian. Watching his retreating figure, I sneered inwardly. Brother, cherish these final moments of warmth with the young lady, for your days of comfort are numbered. Winter had passed, and spring had arrived. On this day, the emperor held a spring banquet in the imperial garden with his high-ranking concubines. As a palace maid to Song Guifei, I was also there to attend to her. After 3 rounds of wine, I suddenly heard the sound of stringed instruments, followed by a figure in sky-blue robes gracefully emerging from among the flowers. It was none other than the young mistress. She was wearing the sky-blue long dress that my brother had taken from me, its hem flowing like water, dancing among the flowers to the music. She was indeed beautiful, like a fairy descended from heaven. The other concubines present all wore displeased expressions. Earlier, we tried to compete for the emperor's favor, but she looked down on us. She's the most arrogant and aloof. Why would she come here to dance after not seeing the emperor for months? The empress smiled and took a grape from my hand without saying a word. After the dance, the young lady approached the emperor and bowed gracefully. Your humble servant has not seen the emperor for many days, thinking of him day and night. Upon hearing that the emperor was here today to enjoy the spring, I arranged this dance to bring him joy. Now that the dance is finished, your humble servant will take her leave. The young lady finished speaking and stood up to leave. This tactic of feigning reluctance and then retreating left the other concubines rolling their eyes in exasperation. Unfortunately, the emperor was easily swayed by such tactics and called her back. Yaoer, since you've come, please sit down and keep me company. The young lady had not received the emperor's favor for several months due to the scar on her face. Upon hearing his words, tears welled up in her eyes, and she immediately sat down beside the emperor. As the young lady and the emperor exchanged tender glances, the empress suddenly spoke up. She smiled sweetly and said, "Yaoer's dance has left me spellbound. However, I have a question. This spring banquet only invited me, Xu Fei, and Jing Fei, the high-ranking concubines. The emperor specifically instructed that no others were to enter. How did Yaoer manage to get in?" Upon hearing this, the emperor's expression immediately changed slightly. To be fair, the young lady's dance was indeed beautiful. But the person who let her in was indeed negligent. The imperial consort said. The security of the palace is of utmost importance. Today, it was Lady Yao who was allowed in. But what if it was someone else tomorrow? This matter concerns the emperor's safety, we must not be careless. As someone who had been favored by the emperor for many years, the imperial consort's words struck the emperor right where it hurt. You must know that in recent years, the emperor had been attacked by assassins multiple times in the palace, and he still felt uneasy about it. The emperor furrowed his brows and said in a deep voice, "Who is responsible for guarding the imperial garden?" I stood silently, thinking to myself, who else could it be? Sure enough, a moment later, a young eunuch came to report. The gatekeeper is Zhou Shufeng, the imperial guard. The young lady realized that things were taking a turn for the worse. This grand display of vying for favor might just come to nothing. She quickly tugged at the emperor's sleeve and spoke softly. Zhou the guard saw how deeply I longed for the emperor and, out of kindness, reluctantly allowed me to enter the imperial garden. Please spare Zhou the imperial guard for the sake of my undying devotion. The young lady was of noble character and rarely indulged in public displays of affection. The emperor, who had just been captivated by her dance, felt a moment of mercy. Very well. I shall forgive him for this lapse in duty. But this shall not be repeated. The Empress Dowager set down her wine cup and her expression turned cold. Oh, was the imperial guard's mercy because he was moved by your devotion to the emperor? Or because your relationship is not ordinary? At these words, the young lady's face turned pale. Empress Dowager, how dare you speak to me like this? The Empress consort rose and knelt before the emperor. Your Majesty, there have been rumors circulating in the palace that Lady Yao and Zhou Xuanfeng have an unusual relationship. I always believed them to be groundless. But seeing Zhou Xuanfeng risk being punished for dereliction of duty just to let Lady Yao in, I now fear the rumors may not be entirely unfounded. The emperor's expression darkened. He had always been a suspicious man. Bring Zhou Shufeng forward. His brother was brought forward. As soon as he knelt down, he cried out, Your Majesty, please judge fairly. I am innocent of any wrongdoing toward Lady Yao. I have never shown her any favoritism. Before he could finish, a young palace maid by the Empress's side sneered. No favoritism? We saw it with our own eyes. You forced Mu Yun to give the Tian Shui Qing long dress, which was originally meant for the Empress, to Lady Yao. Now she's wearing it. The young lady bit her lip, tears welling up in her eyes. She twisted the hem of her skirt and stammered. This was voluntarily offered by the clothing bureau. The Empress Dowager scolded the young palace maid. Su Yu, what business do you have speaking here? You have no sense of propriety. The young palace maid hurriedly apologized. After the mistress and servant exchanged a few words, the Empress consort finally turned to me with a faint smile. Mu Yun, since this matter involves you and Zhou Shufeng is your elder brother, you should explain it yourself. I nodded and knelt in the center of the hall. My brother looked at me. His eyes filled with hope. He must have thought that I was his own sister, sharing his joys and sorrows, and that I would certainly do my best to protect him in this crisis. But in truth, I had already made up my mind. I could not forget that in my previous life, the snow lotus I had found for my grandmother was taken by my brother and given to the young miss. My grandmother coughed up blood in the depths of winter and died before the next spring arrived. After our ancestral home in the old village was sold, my parents had to go to the village to make a living, where they were scolded and beaten by the village head. That autumn, they both contracted tuberculosis and passed away. And I, after narrowly escaping from the rebels, was abandoned by my brother on the street and died of hunger and cold. These events made me realize that my brother's feelings for the lady would destroy our entire family. Therefore, I had no choice but to act first. At that moment, in the grand hall, I bowed deeply before the emperor. Your Majesty. Zhou Shufeng's intentions toward Lady Yao are indeed impure. As soon as these words were spoken, the hall fell silent. My brother rushed forward. Zhou Muyun. How dare you? Two strong eunuchs grabbed him from both sides and forcibly covered his mouth. I knelt and said, Zhou Shufeng has indeed forced the servant multiple times to give items meant for other palaces to Lady Yao. Even the snow jujube that the Empress Dowager personally bestowed upon me to save my grandmother's life was nearly forcibly taken by my brother to treat the young lady's appearance. Yao Guiren grew desperate. With tears in her eyes, she pointed at me pitifully. Mu Yun, you are the younger sister of Zhou the guard. How could you slander your elder brother like this? I held my head high and said, since I entered the palace, I am first and foremost a palace maid of the Forbidden City, and only then the younger sister of my brother. Loyalty and filial piety come first, loyalty before filial piety. If I were to withhold the truth from the emperor out of familial affection, that would be a crime deserving of death. These were the words my brother had taught me in my previous life, and now I had finally returned them to him. My brother's eyes were burning with rage, and he hated me with all his might. But after all, the most important thing was to clear his name. He could only use all his strength to break free from the eunuchs who were holding him down and kowtow desperately. Your Majesty, please see clearly. Before the lady entered the palace, I was a servant in the mansion. All of this is because of my loyalty to the lady. I have never had the slightest thought of a personal relationship. The Empress Dowager spoke coldly. Oh, if Zhou the guard never harbored any personal feelings, why did he shout about his innocence with Yao the noble lady the moment he entered? My brother didn't understand at first, but after a moment, he realized what had been implied, and his mind went blank. All the blood rushed to his head. When he was brought in earlier, no one had asked him about his crimes, yet he had already declared his innocence regarding his relationship with Lady Yao. However, under normal circumstances, a guard brought in without any prior questioning should first acknowledge his own dereliction of duty. The words my brother blurted out exposed his guilty conscience. Unable to speak, he could only repeatedly kowtow, claiming his innocence. The emperor's brows furrowed in uncertainty. He glanced at me and whispered, Mu Yun, this is your elder brother. Do you believe he is loyal? Or does he harbor personal feelings? I bit my lip, shedding 2 crocodile tears, and put on an expression of reluctance to betray my own kin. Your Majesty, as the younger sister of Zhou the guard, I naturally believe that my brother acted out of loyalty to the young master. However, I also know that this matter has caused a stir throughout the city. If we were to sweep it under the rug, it would greatly harm both the reputation of Lady Yao and the name of the Zhou family. Therefore, in my humble opinion, it would be best to allow the Ministry of Justice to take my brother away for investigation. I believe the officials of the Ministry of Justice are experts in investigating cases. If they conduct a thorough inquiry and find nothing, then my brother's loyalty to Lady Yao must be pure. My brother glared at me. His lips trembled. How could anyone in this world suggest sending a blood relative to the Ministry of Punishment? Zhou Muchuan, how cruel are you? How could I not? In my previous life, it was your suggestion that sent me there. Though I felt a sense of relief, I shed 2 tears on the surface. Brother, I would never wish you to suffer. But there is no other way. Thus, under the Empress's guidance, my brother was sent to the Ministry of Punishment for severe interrogation. Yao Guiren was confined to Chunshui Xian, and many of her palace attendants were also taken out for questioning. The first to come forward as witnesses were 2 palace maids named Juer and Xinger. These 2 palace maids were none other than the girls who had suffered with me in the Ministry of Punishment in my previous life and were eventually beaten to death. They were both very young, only 13 or 14 years old. In the previous life, they had been brainwashed with the word loyalty until it was ingrained in their bones, and they died without understanding what was happening. In this life, I approached them in advance and assured them, "Don't worry. You are just palace maids responsible for sweeping and keeping watch in the courtyard. If anything happens to your master, you will not be implicated." As a result, Jur and Xinger reported the truth they had witnessed multiple times, that Zhou the guard frequently entered the spring water pavilion and stayed for 1 or 2 hours at a time. This made my brother's situation in the Ministry of Punishment even more dire. Yao's situation also became extremely dangerous. With the experience from my previous life, I already understood Yao very well. She appeared noble and aloof, but in reality, she was the most self-centered person imaginable. If she could sacrifice those around her to ensure her own safety, she would do so without hesitation. Thus, one late night, Yao Guiren's personal attendant palace maid used her connections to arrange a meeting with Zhou Shifeng. Zhou Shifeng's eyes lit up with hope. "Did the young mistress send you to see me? Rest assured, I will not reveal anything." The palace maid's eyes filled with tears. "The young mistress is in grave danger this time. If we cannot completely dispel the emperor's suspicions, there may be no chance for her to regain her position." The brother pleaded earnestly, "How can we dispel his suspicions?" The palace maid bit her lip. "Didn't Zhou the guard once say that his feelings for the young mistress began as master and servant and transcended gender? If Zhou the guard were no longer a man, he could truly fulfill this love from now on, and the emperor's suspicions would never arise again." The senior palace maid delivered the message and then left. As it turned out, the older brother did not disappoint the young mistress. That night, while the guards were dozing off, he took a knife and castrated himself. The older brother had underestimated the danger of castration. Those in the palace who specialized in performing such procedures on eunuchs had precise aim. The older brother, however, had no experience and took no measures to stop the bleeding. Fortunately, the guards were awakened by the screams and arrived in time to check on him. Otherwise, he would have bled to death within the span of a stick of incense. Even though he was discovered in time and received medical treatment, the older brother remained unconscious for half a month. However, this act of mercy from the emperor led to his release from the Ministry of Punishment. When my brother regained consciousness, he found himself lying on a bed in a remote chamber. With great effort, he opened his eyes and saw a woman dressed in silk and adorned with jewels sitting not far away. "Miss." My brother was deeply moved, never expecting the young lady to have come to watch over him personally. I smiled and shattered his illusion. "Brother, it's me. I am now a first-class palace maid by the side of the empress, with a comfortable life in terms of food, clothing, and accommodation. Though I sat in this humble room, my hair was adorned with sparkling pearl hairpins, and jingling jade bracelets adorned my wrists." Seeing my brother staring at me, I smiled faintly and said, "What's wrong? Don't you recognize me? Now that I've risen to prominence in the palace, have you gone mad with joy?" My brother stared blankly for a moment, then spat out a curse. "Zhou Muchuan, you traitor! You betrayed your master for glory, trampled on the young lady to climb to wealth and power with the Empress Dowager. Wait and see, when the young lady regains her favor, your retribution will follow." I didn't get angry. I just asked slowly, "Are you still waiting to serve in the young lady's palace? When she rises to power, you'll be able to rise with her." My brother sneered. "I'm not like you. I'm loyal to the young lady, not for wealth, but to be by her side." I sighed regretfully. "Yes. But unfortunately, you will never be able to accompany the young lady again. Just yesterday, the young lady was sentenced to death by the emperor and sent to the cold palace." My brother froze. After a moment, he roared, "You're lying. You're deceiving me." I remained seated, my expression calm. Despair filled my brother's eyes. "Why? I am already a rootless man. I can never have any romantic feelings for the young lady again in this lifetime. Why did the emperor still?" My brother wept bitterly. Young lady. I stood up and said calmly, "Brother, the young lady was indeed executed by the emperor because of her affair. But it wasn't with you. In my previous life, I was captured along with Jur and Shinger and tortured in the Ministry of Punishment because the emperor suspected the young lady of having an affair with his own younger brother, Prince Chi. The three of us were either killed or maimed, but we finally convinced the emperor of the young lady's innocence. However, the truth is that the young lady was not innocent. In this life, after the incident at the spring banquet, the Empress Dowager ordered a search of the young lady's spring water pavilion. This search uncovered everything: the letters between the young lady and Prince Chi, their tokens of affection. At that moment, I looked at my brother, who was as if struck by lightning, and whispered, "Why are you so heartbroken, brother? Could it be that you think the young lady has feelings for you?" My brother's dazed eyes turned to me. He truly believed that. He thought the young lady had entered the palace against her will, and that they could never be together in this lifetime. Therefore, he had chosen to accompany her for the rest of his life under the guise of a servant. "How could that be, brother?" I said softly. "You didn't see how she, who is so unskilled in needlework, dyed the fabric red with her blood while making shoes and socks for Prince Chi. Compared to that, what has the young lady ever given you? Just a few kind words, a few flirtatious glances, nothing else." Sigh. Thinking about it, a few words and a glance were enough to make you run errands for her like a dog. If I were her, I wouldn't need to give anything else. In the young lady's heart, a cheap and useful servant like my brother is probably irreplaceable. My brother's eyes went blank, and he vomited blood. This was the true blow that killed him. All the effort he had put in was for nothing. I no longer looked at him and turned to leave. My brother died that night. The physical injuries weren't fatal. What truly tormented him to death was the complete shattering of his heart. So he tied a rope to the beam and hanged himself. The Forbidden City was like that. Even the deaths of concubines were quickly forgotten, let alone the death of a servant. It was like a grain of dust tossed into the sea, stirring not a single ripple. Only my family was grieved by my brother's death. They had not been reborn, unlike me, who had completely cut ties with my brother. However, my brother's previous actions had indeed broken their hearts. So after a period of intense mourning, my parents gradually came to terms with it. Additionally, I had purchased our ancestral home, renovated it, and brought my parents and grandmother to live there. With the company of local relatives, they gradually found happiness again. Without my brother's troubles, our family's life in this lifetime can be considered thriving. I continued to serve as a senior palace maid by the Empress's side, while Jur and Shinger also came from Chunxuexian to work in the Palace of Eternal Joy under my command. Later, during the Emperor's southern tour, I was granted the title of County Princess for saving his life from rebels, and the Empress regarded me as her adopted sister. I accompanied the Empress consort for many years, watching her give birth to children and continuing to compete with the newcomers in the palace. Qin Lao and the embroidery maids from the clothing bureau remained close to me. Some of them went to serve in various palaces, while others were married off by the emperor. I sent them all generous gifts. Time flew by, and I turned 25, the age when one must leave the palace. The Empress consort had by then become the Imperial Empress consort, and her son had been designated as the Crown Prince. The Imperial Empress consort urged me to stay in the palace and continue accompanying her. In truth, I knew that staying was a good choice. Once the Crown Prince ascended the throne, the Imperial consort would become the Empress Dowager, and I would be her trusted attendant, enjoying prestige, status, and honor. Even the Emperor would have to give me some face. But I still knelt before the Imperial consort and pleaded to leave the palace. The Imperial consort pondered for a moment before finally agreeing. "Very well. In this lifetime, I have no such opportunity. Go and see the blue sky beyond these red walls for me. She bestowed upon me gold, silver, rice fields, and a mansion, granting me the honor of returning home. I finally stepped out of the forbidden city, breathing in the fresh air. It seemed no different from within the palace walls. Yet everything felt different. The scene of being sent into the palace by my brother was still vivid in my mind. But now I was finally myself again, no longer a servant to any master. I looked up at the sky. It was clear and blue, with only white pigeons flying by. From now on, there would be many more days of freedom and happiness waiting for me. The end.